Fantastic. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to MAR Talks, NeuroInclusion and BIPOC Parenting. My name is Carrie Keevers. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the founder of Mums Against Racism Canada. And I am joining you today from my home office, which is on the traditional ancestral lands of the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And the area that I'm in actually was the home and land of the Chilkowich tribe. So it's down in a little area of Vancouver called Fairfield, which is close to Gonzales Beach, and it is absolutely beautiful. I feel very privileged to be able to live here and to just, on the days when things are heavy, when parenting is hard, when I want to pull my hair out or I'm like following up on appointments for the millionth time and trying to get somebody to help me, that I'm just able to, walk outside and walk down to the beach and just take in that medicine of the ocean and breathe out everything that is heavy with the rolling waves and have that come back in. So um, I have immense gratitude to be able to be a guest here and want to be a good guest. And with doing that, wanting to use the power and privilege that I have, where I have it, to really uphold Indigenous voices and the direction that they're wanting to take the space, and just support those efforts and the stewardship where I can. And some of our guests today share being on this land with me, and some are in different spots. So I'll let them introduce themselves in that way. But today we have Levon Abshire and Joni Oldhoff and Carissa Crawley with us today to talk about their experiences with being a parent to an ND kid, a neurodivergent child, and to possibly having neurodivergence themselves, and just what that's like navigating that and adding in that additional layer context of race and how that further spices up, we'll say, spices up being a parent. So I will get right into it, and I will ask our first question, which is, can everybody introduce themselves and how neurodivergence presents in your lives? So are you a neurodivergent parent raising neurodivergent kids, or maybe a neurotypical parent with neurodivergent kids, or maybe an ND parent with ND kids? Like the combination is endless. So if I can I start with you, Levon?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Levon Abshire. I use the pronoun she, her. I am zooming in from the traditional ancestral and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish. My home is located in East Vancouver, and I am a relatively new adult ND parent to a ND kiddo. He was formally diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 3. He's 13 now. So we're going into year 10. And just really, really happy to be here and to share our story, to be able to bring more awareness, as well as to connect with others who are also raising ND kiddos.
Thanks, Levon. Krista, how about over to you?
Hi, I live on the stolen land of the Lekwungen people, known now as Songhees and Esquimalt. I also am really privileged to work directly with those nations. I'm a teacher, and the kids that come to my school live on reserve. So I kind of get that extra little window into their teachings because they will come to our school and like share their teachings because their kids go there. Um, I have two kiddos, both neurodiverse, and I'm neurodiverse myself. My ancestry is primarily settler, although I do have some ancestry down in the states that is indigenous. I'm obviously white presenting, and sorry, sometimes I lose words because of my neurodiversity, but I don't understand not having the privilege of being white presenting because my background, my indigenous background, is further removed from me. So I have two kids who are Black presenting. I can't remember. Oh, I'm she, her. Is there anything else I was supposed to say? Sorry.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Krista. And Joni.
All right. Hi, everybody. Tansy. My name is Joni Oldhoff. I'm also known as Miko Poesis. My pronouns are she, her. And I also live on the stolen territories of the Lekwungen, Esquimalt, and Songhees nations. I actually grew up just outside of Songhees Reserve. I am Cree and Scottish mixed heritage. And I belong to the Mitchell Nation. I am a direct descendant of Chief Mitchell, and we belong to Treaty 6 territory, kind of like what is now Edmonton, Alberta, sort of St. Albert area was where my people had their reserve. And yeah, I am neurodiverse. So I have autism and ADHD. I was recently featured in an article in Autism BC. Please read it if you can, and more about my story. And yeah, I am raising two kids who are not currently formally diagnosed, but definitely I can recognize some neurodiversity. So yeah, it's we have a really neurodiverse household. We have a lot of different elements going on, and yeah, so that's who I am. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joni. And just to round it out, I'll share my background is I have Swedish, Irish, and English on my mom's side and African on my dad's side. So am multiracial, Black presenting, and very similar for myself, and why this topic is near and dear is I am one of those lost girls who obviously neurodivergent all throughout my life, but not until my 40s did I really kind of figure out what was going on. And so I'm still in the process of getting diagnosed, and it's totally that pipeline of kid to parent to grandparent realization of doing that, recognizing that, you know, my kids were neurodivergent, and then, oh, hey, hold on a minute, I think I am too. So I'm very excited for this conversation. And with that, like, that was my quick snapshot of my experience. Curious for the three of you, what's been your overall experience as a parent with, you know, neurodivergence in your family? We have a full neurospicy household. So that can be a lot sometimes, but would love to hear what your experience is. Does anybody want to go first, or should I just call on you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Carrie. So I didn't share this. I am a daughter of immigrants, Filipino immigrants. So I identify as second generation Filipino. My son is biracial, Filipino and Black. And when in answering this question, I really can't separate race and neurodivergence. Because that is our experience, and because it's very visible that we are racialized, both of us. But more importantly, I think the overall experience, you know, when I was pregnant with him, I knew that it was going to be hard. I knew that he was going to experience racism. I knew that his color of skin would be darker than mine, and he may not necessarily look like me, and that there might be questions from folks. So, and I myself had already been engaged in what it would look like to be anti-racist, what it would look like for me to teach him how to respond to that and how to live with that. So I felt like, okay, I can do this. I can be his mom. With his dad and with our family, we could do this. When he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, that was a very different story. I felt I didn't have that lived experience with him. Like at the time, I didn't. So I didn't know how I was going to be his parent. I didn't know how I was going to help him live through the stigma, the discrimination that still exists for disabled individuals and folks who are neurodivergent. So for me, it's really been about learning. The experience has just been about learning. It's been about putting aside my own thoughts around what it means to be educated, what it means to be able to learn. So a lot of unlearning has been happening personally in these 10 years. But in terms of overall experience, I would say parenting is hard. It's hard. And then, you know, having an autistic kiddo, there are different unique challenges that present itself. So I would say the first couple of years were really isolating in having to learn how to parent him. And then having to sort of decide or decipher, is the world treating you because of what they see? Or is the world treating you because they've met you, spent a little bit of time with you, and so their interactions with you are based on this new information of being autistic and how that shows up. So that's just a snapshot, but I don't want to take up all the time, so I'll pass it
Oh.
on to Carissa or Joni.
Thank you, Lavon. Krista, how about you?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, my brain
Nope, that
forgot
is
the
okay.
specific question.
I am happy to repeat the question. So we are just asking kind of generally what's been your overall experience as a parent with neurodivergence in your family?
Okay, so I I'm a teacher and I'm a learning support teacher. So when my son started showing like signs of being neurodiverse, I caught it quite early. Like most parents don't, but because I work in that field and I read a lot of like reports that talk about the early, like what things were like early on for the kids I work with, I was like, huh. You know, so I knew before my son was one that we needed to get him on an assessment list. And it took me a while to convince people around me, specifically my partner and his family. They culturally, they have a different kind of take on neurodiversity, and likely people in his family are neurodiverse, but it's not something that was ever acknowledged. Their kind of view on it was that he was just a boy. And so there was a lot of pushback around it. And even when he did receive the diagnosis, it was not accepted until he got a little bit older, and they were like, huh, yeah, maybe. So because I'm white, there was like, it's different me navigating it, because I grew up in a society where that was more accepted to diagnose those things, whereas my partner didn't. So I had to navigate that without being too like forceful, and I was at first, and then I realized I was. So like my experience is a little different because I'm white, and I had to be really mindful of how I navigated that for the other side of the family. And so sorry, my brain's really tired and I'm not holding on to what I'm supposed to be doing. So
Yeah, right.
I might go on a tangent. So if I do, just like rein me back in, Carrie.
Okay.
But
This is a tangent welcome space. We're all neurodivergent. We will have many side quests in our conversations today. It's okay.
Yeah. So my son was diagnosed when he was 2 years old, 2 years, 4 months. And back then, like, I wasn't aware that I had neurodiversity as well. So I have ADD, the inattentive type. And that's actually, and I was in a car accident and I had a brain injury, and it just changed how my brain worked. And that's when my OT was like, you may have had ADHD prior, because we talk about histories and stuff. And I was like, oh, interesting. So like I wasn't like, I thought I was, when he was diagnosed, I was like, I was approaching it from a neurotypical like brain, I thought, trying to understand a neurodiverse brain. And sorry, I covered my mouth. Yeah. So I don't know, it's been a ride, especially after my brain injury, because our like, we're very different. We're very opposite in how our brains function, especially right after the brain injury. My son is a stimmer, and a very loud stimmer, and I'm sensory avoidant and he's sensory seeking. So that's been really like a challenge for us as a parent and a child. He gets in trouble a lot because of his race, because he's targeted. Same with my daughter. So my daughter also, she's not on the autism spectrum, but she has ADHD, and she has pretty significant anxiety because she hasn't had the support she needed in place in school to navigate all those feelings, of feeling different and stuff like that. And she is like, I've been fighting with her school every year to get an IEP put in place, to support her. And her white classmates, like her best friend and her, had a similar issue with being sick, and her best friend, who is white, was allowed to call home, was allowed to go home sick, but because my daughter's anxious and they want to keep her at school rather than support what's going on for her, they didn't let her call me. And so like things like that, that's one example. But and her teacher this year, I don't know if I should say this out loud or not, because she's still with the teacher, but the teacher is very I can't think of the word for it right now, but is always like, everyone has challenges, everyone this, everyone that, and there's a word for that, and I can't think of what it's called, but ableist. She's very ableist, and she doesn't look at each kid individually. She's like, everyone's having a hard time at school, like, you just need to figure it out. And so and there's other kids in her class that get given more leeway to have those feelings. And this is not the first time I've experienced this with teachers. And being a white person, I don't understand, like I don't have the lived experience to understand that, but when I see how it affects my daughter, I know that it's like that I need to advocate and that it's not okay. But I do have because I'm white, I'm probably more listened to than her father. And so yeah, I don't know what else to say. I probably have more to say, but my brain's all over the place. So
That's
like,
great.
that's the
Thank
difference
you.
between me and other panelists, is that I am white. So I've probably had a different experience advocating for my child than the other people on the panel.
Thanks, Krista.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we're all going to have our individual experiences based on all of our different factors and our family factors. And I know that there's a lot of parents out there who are white parents to racialized kids who are also trying to navigate this now. So it's important to hear about that too. So Joni, what's been your overall experience as a parent with neurodivergence in your family? And I'm going to bring in the next question too. As part of that, can you identify what's your favorite part of having neurodivergence in your family? What joys, if you can identify them, does neurodivergence bring to your life too? So we'll wrap those together.
Yeah. So that pipeline, like we were talking about in the car the other day, is really relevant for me. So I have been, I'm going to say, misdiagnosed my whole life. So up until, gosh, like probably within the last 3 years. So I'm 34. So within the last 3 or so years, I have always just been told I have severe anxiety, I have severe depression, and that's how I was treated. So I was always treated with, oh, you have really high anxiety, and this is just hard. And then later on, I was diagnosed with CPTSD due to childhood trauma. And but then my son came along in 2015, and I noticed early on that he would react to really afraid of like loud sounds. He hated loud sounds. And like not just like, oh, like this is a loud sound and I'm like anxious. It was like it would throw off his morning at a young age, at a really young age. It was like I can't, he couldn't be in overstimulating situations.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point where I was like, oh my gosh, like I I do that. Like I lived through that. And that made me realize that I had to start looking a little bit deeper. It was easy to just be like, oh, I'm an anxious person and here's my anxious child. And but his suffering was more. And so it kind of led me down in the spiral. Thankfully, to social media, I was able to start to gain language that I never had before. I had no idea that other people lived or had experiences that were similar to mine until other people started talking about it. And I was exposed to that. And then it was this realization of like, oh my gosh, like, and I started bringing up these things up to his doctors and we started kind of getting onto these wait lists. And I'm like, maybe my kids, or maybe my kid at the time, is something else is going on with like this hypersensitivity. And when I started looking into that for him, I was like, wow, these things really check out for me. So that has been an interesting experience for me in that it's having children has allowed me to understand my own neurodiversity or my own neurodivergence. Um, the other piece about that, though, is that now I'm also recognizing that as an ADHD person, that parenting is also really hard. I mean, it's really hard anyways, but because I'm autistic and because I have these sensory overloads, I'm now seeing these like patterns for myself. I'm like, I have been diagnosed with intense depression, but really I'm having autistic meltdowns because I'm overstimulated most of the time. Children are very stimulating. And my child, just like I think it was Levon or Carissa, one of you is sensory seeking. So my eldest is sensory seeking and I am sensory avoidant. And so I am like, it's a lot. It's hard for me to balance those things. But it's been great because my biggest joy right now is, I mean, there's lots of them, really. I love that we can understand each other. We have like our own just ways of communicating. And I think that that's really beautiful. The thing that I'm loving the most is hearing my son identify his struggles. And I think hearing that he has language for it, um, it makes me want to cry. I'm sorry. But it's just like, we were sitting there the other day and he said, I was talking about struggling with something. And he's like, oh, my brain does that too, mama. That's ADHD or whatever. And I was just like, oh, because when I was a kid, I was punished for a lot of my symptoms. And so in like various ways, not necessarily by my parents, but just, I was even self-punished because the world was hard and I didn't understand why. And it's just, that's my biggest joy now, is to see like my kids will have this ability to identify their needs, and like, wow, what a gift that is, that my kids don't have to grow up without accommodations, and they don't have to grow up without not with the not knowing. They don't have to figure that out later on in life. And so that brings a lot of joy to my life. It's just seeing like my children embrace who they are and not shy away from it, or not feel the sense of shame and like heaviness that I had to feel, because for us in our world, it's not something that is taboo or whatever. It's not a bad thing. It's been celebrated. And so that's been my biggest joy, for sure.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Joni. I can totally relate to that. Like for me, I have 5 people in my family, and we're all neurospicy. And a term that I recently learned was stim clash. So that idea of, sensory seeking versus sensory avoidant, and that coming together. And that was like a big impetus for me, because I felt like, I was like, I got this, like for parenting, I got this, I got this, I got this. And then as my kids got older, I was like, oh my God, I do not have this, because just more and more was coming out, and it just kind of fell apart. But that joy of, I was sharing a little video about like what autism means with my kiddo that was just recently diagnosed, and that look on his face of just like, someone gets it, right? And like, that's me. And I'm like, and so that brings a lot of joy too, of that. It's them knowing that there's not something wrong with them, that their brain just processes things in a different way, and that we all do it in a different way. That's brought a lot of joy for me. How about you, Livon? What are some joys that you're experiencing right now?
He's a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that many of the things that he is going through and experiences that he's having are typical teenage things.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it's just so nice to be able to be parenting a teenager. That you don't hear that often. But all the things in terms of the emotions that are changing, the body that's changing, that independence of like speaking to me in a certain way. I might get a little perturbed about it, but underneath, I'm like laughing. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's like typical teenage stuff. So that right now is a bit of a joy. But I would say the overall experience, the joy is really seeing things through his eyes and things that I would have missed,
Mm-hmm.
because he will pick up on things ever since a young child that I just wouldn't pick up on. Whether that's subtleties in people or what's out in the environment. So he's really taught me to slow down, which has been a really nice joy. Because I think in my own personal experience, I was really good at masking things and controlling things. That's how I believe I've been able to do, well in school and in the workplace. But I love that, through his life, he's able to tell me to just slow down. I'll say things about what I think needs to be corrected or what I think is appropriate, and he'll respond to me like, who cares? Why do you even care about that? So that feeling of me caring about what everybody else and what the world wants has been like released because of him. I still have it, but he reminds me, why do you care about that, Mom? Like, who cares about that, Mom? So that brings me joy. And then just, he's so compassionate. And, when we were talking about autism in the early days, many folks would talk about, and researchers, how They didn't have the social skills. They didn't have the empathy and the compassion. And he is one of the most compassionate people that I know, biggest heart. So that brings me a lot of joy and a lot of shame in terms of having to look at myself in the mirror and, how can I be as compassionate as him? Gosh, this kid, I tell you, it's like a mirror in front of my face all the time. So that's joyful. Can I just say like one more thing right now that's bringing me oh my gosh, my kiddo is a 5-pin bowler and he's been playing for the last 4 years. He's on a team, he's won provincials and he's going to represent Team BC at nationals. Like, so
amazing.
cool. Yeah. So yeah, that's bringing me a lot of joy right now.
That's fantastic. I love that. I love that. My kiddo starts axe throwing league today. So yeah, we've been on a mission to try and find the activity, right? That he's gonna love. And he did a camp and this kid throws bullseyes like every time. I was like, okay, it's axe throwing. Let's do this.
Yes.
But something that you said, I just wanted to touch on a little bit of that whole process of unmasking and how like our kiddo when you are blessed to have neurodivergent kiddos, I don't know, there's probably more options than this, but I feel like there's a bit of a binary where as a parent you kind of either double down on those societal norms and upholding those systems and really leaning into that and trying to parent that way, or you go through this process of letting go. And it's a hard process and it's a constantly questioning of like, why do I care? Why is this a thing? And that can be exhausting while trying to also do all of the other things as a parent. And I just wanted to acknowledge, that kind of passing statement that you made about that unmasking, and that it's like it's a lot, it's a big deal, and it's trying to like show up and be honoring to our kiddos and their experience, and then also recognizing that we need to honor and sometimes grieve for the experiences that we had growing up when we weren't being seen in that way or supported in that way. So Chris, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask you both, and I will happily repeat the question for you, but we'll start with joys. What joys is neurodivergence bringing to your family? And then you had also touched on kind of the cultural difference. And so wanting to kind of explore that too, of, what's been your cultural experience with neurodivergence, and then potentially with your kids and your their extended family and how that kind of influences everything. So joys, cultural experience.
Honestly, there's more joys now than there is hardships, but in the beginning it was very hard. Because I didn't know as much. And as you parent, like as your child grows up with neurodiversity, you learn more and more. And luckily, as part of my job, I'm constantly doing professional development and stuff like that. And it's just part of my nature to research. So when he was first diagnosed, I wanted I can't remember, it was either Levon or Carrie said about like, oh no, it was Carrie who was talking about like fitting them into the neurotypical role, or like allowing them to, or not allowing them, like teaching them to help others accept their neurodiversity. So in the first year of his diagnosis, I was like, how are we going to fit him into society? And then as I did more research and read actually autistic adults like perspective on things, I was like, I'm going about this the wrong way. And that's when I started teaching him how to ask for what he wanted, how to like essentially train others to be around him and make him comfortable. And so the joy I see in him in him getting what he needs out of the situation in a calm way and in an informative way, and having others respond to him, like that's one of my biggest prides for him, is that he's really learned how to have others fit his needs, as well as understanding that others have needs. And that is and other things, like Levon said, he notices things that I don't, because he wants to understand the world so much. Like that is his biggest want, is that he'll ask questions that I never ask, but like I don't actually know the answer to, but it's just not a question I would have asked. And so he's opened up my eyes to see like more of the world, and to understand a lot of things in the world. And like we'll do some deep dives on the internet just to find the answers to his questions. And then I'll have students at work ask me similar questions. They'll be like, I actually know the answer to that. I wouldn't have and he's made me a better teacher. He's made me a better person, because I have learned how to not just focus on my own experience, but look outwards and try and understand others. And my daughter, like her journey started later because she was a masker. And so hers is more like trying to fit that neurotype of neurotypical. And so it's been more of a journey with her, because she's gone into the deep depression, the deep anxiety, because she's female and she wants to like assimilate more than my son did, essentially. And so, but she has some really intense interests, such as digital art. So watching her like develop those interests and be so proud of something, because there's so many things she's not proud of and she's embarrassed about, but watching those things she's proud of has been really special. And then helping her learn to focus on those things that she feels successful in and stuff like that. Okay, and then the cultural difference thing. In my family growing up, this might not be a cultural thing, it might just be my own family. Diagnosis was like always the goal. So I have a lot of different medical issues. And so I grew up in a family where my mom was constantly taking me to the doctor to figure out what was going on with me. And I have a bunch of autoimmune disorders, so it was always confusing, and we're always like constantly seeking the answer. Whereas in Fred, that's their father's name, in Fred's family, it was just more like learning to, not even learning to live with it, but like, this is who we are, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're living. So it was less of a diagnosis culture and more of a like, he's just a boy and that's how boys act, And so bringing together our two kind of family philosophies and was hard. And I am like, my ex-partner is quiet and he doesn't talk a lot. And so like I was more forceful around things, because I've had to advocate for myself through my whole life medically. And I also have a learning disability and like attention issues. So I learned early on that I had to advocate for myself a lot. And so that was my my way of thinking going into this. So we definitely had a lot of disagreements. And looking back, I probably should have approached it differently, but I was just like, nope, this is what we're doing. And because I'm like, I don't know how to explain that personality trait, but like, I'm just like, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to do it. And I know there's a word for that. Like that just went out because he's not really conflict. Like he didn't like conflict, and he would tell me his opinion, but I would just keep going. So, when we come against new diagnoses now, I've switched how I do it, because I wasn't honoring his cultural way of doing things and his like his just general way of doing things. And that's a regret I have. I've learned a lot since having kids with him, because I was like, and especially joining Carrie's group, like I learned a lot from how I used to be as like my racial biases were showing up a lot and stuff like that. There's a word for that. Is that the right one? Yeah. So like when we were in the middle of diagnosis, I wasn't as aware of that, and I became more aware of it when my kids were like 4 and 5, and so yeah, I'm sure some of the things that I did were really hard for Fred to live through, and we've talked about it since then. And but yeah, I guess that's kind of our experience. And now we have discussions around it, and we talk about like we make the discussions child focused, rather than my upbringing and his upbringing. It's like, what's going to help Arya or what's going to help Jalen, and we've shifted it that way because we come from such different backgrounds.
Fantastic. Thanks, Carissa. It can add an extra layer when you have a partner who might not be viewing things in a similar lens, or maybe have certain cultural conditioning. Like my partner comes from like a British home, and it's always very much a stiff upper lip, and you just truck through and don't ever go to the doctor, and like those kinds of things. And so there's definitely differences there too. So I can appreciate that. And Joni, how about you? What the culturally is there for you, your experience of neurodivergence, and is there like a cultural influence there?
Yeah, for sure. So, my understanding of the world is very, aligned with my Indigenous identity. So I grew up, I would say, in culture. So my dad is a knowledge keeper and a pipe carrier. So I grew up in lodge and in ceremony and around a lot of elders, and I'm very privileged and fortunate to grow up in that way. My eldest sister was born with FAS and had very high needs. So she still to this day lives in a home. And so, yeah, for me, culturally and my understanding, an Indigenous understanding for many cross nationally, folks, is that neurodiversity, neurodivergence offers us another way of viewing the world. And so really, what my elders have said to me is that like pre-contact or before colonization, neurodivergence was seen more as a gift. And when I say a gift, I'm not saying it in the like condescending way that a lot of, you know what I mean? Like a lot of, I want to say settler folks or like in today's society would be like, they're gifted. And that's a way of often like minimizing folks' experiences. But for us, or for like me culturally, it's always been seen as an opportunity to broaden our life's experience. So folks who are like with neurodivergence, they are offering us a different perspective. And for that in itself is something that is really like in high regard. So, so that for me has always been nice in my own discovering anyways of my family's neurodiversity and how we are all of the different makeup. I think culturally for me as well, that's been a big piece of my being okay with my diagnosis, because the world has not treated me that way. So like, well, culturally, and I have this understanding of like, wow, this is a gift to be able to hold these things. I think I can't remember which one of you were saying, but about discovering, it was Levon, about discovering your son's, how kind your son is. So for one thing around autistic people is that we have a very strong sense of social justice. We have a very really strong sense of equity and fairness, and that's been a huge part of my life. And my elders, and I would say like my community, has always been in a big support of that. And so yeah, for me, culturally speaking, the way that neurodiversity is seen again as a gift has been really, really supportive in my own journey and my own understanding of myself. It's really colonial culture, I would say, that has made my life hard and difficult. And now, though, I'm finding that those aspects of my cultural understanding is helping me in the way that I'm choosing to raise my children outside of those structures. And so that's been really wonderful. And I'm really grateful to come from a culture that views neurodiversity in that way.
Thanks, Joni. Yeah, it's really beautiful when it can be just part of the experience, right? And just not something that's like other. So I really appreciate it. And that's, I mean, I think what we're all trying to work to create, even within like our own families and through advocacy, greater and beyond. So, Levon, I'll ask you the same question about culturally, but also want to kind of dive a little bit more into how race intersects with, perhaps any impacts to access or diagnosis. There is a question in the chat too about just that ability to unmask. How does that impact too? So if I can start with you on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think I can answer both. Culturally, I'm daughter of immigrants, Filipina, and also a colonized country. Education is really important for my family, really important for the Filipino culture, because it is a way out, it is a way up. So that was really important growing up. So I was socialized to understand what it means to be educated, what it means to do well in school, what it means to be smart, what it means to be intelligent. So that really influenced. I was a teacher for 7 years. I had that understanding of what it means to be smart and intelligent, and had my own biases around that. And that really did shape my parenting at the very beginning, and what I had hoped for my child in terms of accessing education. And even in the very beginning, when he was diagnosed, it was still like, okay, what's the problem? How are we going to fix it? What are all the therapies? We can do this. And it has had to shift, and I'm grateful for that. So, my view of what it means to be educated and what school should be, and learning what it means to be smart has shifted. So that particular part of my identity and being Filipino, and that my parents valuing education, really did make it hard in the beginning to unlearn that. In terms of race, there are a lot of fears in terms of raising a young male who looks Black, who has darker skin than me, has curly hair. And the fear, which I always see in the news, is, if there are certain behaviors or certain ways of communicating, that people or law enforcement, are right there to respond in a negative way. I've heard all the stories of racialized autistic people, boys, being harmed and being hurt, some even being killed. So that for me is very real in terms of a fear in raising my child and sending them out into the world. So that question there from Ivana around, is there less opportunity? How do you do that in terms of unmasking? And how do I help my child to be their truest self and authentic? We have conversations about what it means to be racialized, what it might mean for him to be a Black male growing up in this world, and engaging with his dad around those kinds of conversations too, and others in our community. I can do as much as I can, but I don't have that lived experience. So for me, it's really been about, who can I find in this community who could be a really great model for him, but it's hard. It's really hard because there might be some specific characteristics or traits that might not be received or perceived by others because they don't know. And they will attribute it to his race, and they will attribute it to whatever assumptions and prejudices they have been socialized to, right? What they've learned about Black people. So, you know, it's the conversations with my son about that, the sharing of the stories that are out there, that this is real, and, you know, taking that apart. And then, yeah, there are times where I'm like, no, I'm not sure I want you on the bus. You know, I might just have to be driving you everywhere, even though he wants that independence. So I think it's just, you know, the constant conversations about what it means to be Black and what it means to also be autistic and how the world might perceive that. And the world's not fully ready.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's tough. I feel like we're in an in-between time, right? And so, like, there's often that feeling of should, like, our kids should be able to ride the bus and be safe. But the reality is that, like you say, the world's not there yet. We're not there yet. And so, being realistic about that, having those conversations, and creating those safety bubbles where they can, you know, unmask safely, and being able to have those constant conversations. Appreciate that. Thank you. How about you, Joni? We'll flip to you and then come to Carissa. We have 4 minutes left. Mar talks, Mar anything. We always go over time. So we're going to wrap up this question, and then I'm going to ask everybody their one thing that they want to kind of leave everybody with. So we might go a few minutes over. And if you have to go, I appreciate you being here for the hour with us. So Joni and then Carissa, how has race played an impact for you?
Yeah, so for me, I am also off like white pegged, I'm white presenting, I'm light skinned. So I would say how race has impacted, I think, is more of an intergenerational thing. In that, so both of my parents are also have neurodiversity. And my dad in particular, who is a very you know, unambiguous Indigenous man, has had a really, really difficult time with his diagnosis and receiving help. And not on top of that, I would say that he has experienced a lot of trauma and awful experiences because of his autism and how that's presented in the world around him. And when I say like intergenerational trauma, growing up living with him, I can remember so well his, I want to say, like latrophobia, which is like fear of the medical professionals, fear of being, you know, having that kind of diagnosis or kind of getting that help. And so, yeah, I think I carry that a little bit with me, in that I know that I'm in a privileged position. But then I say that, and I'm still 34 and I'm still seeking diagnosis and have been misdiagnosed my whole life. So I think I carry a little bit of that with me. Yeah, so I think it's hard to navigate the medical systems, even in the best of times and under the best of circumstances. And I think that when it comes to how race plays a role in that, for me, I wouldn't say that it has played a role in my diagnosis, or at least I don't think it has. I don't think that my doctors have been, I don't even know if my doctor knows that I have an identity at all. Like, I don't even think we've even talked about it. So I don't know if it has actually impacted my access to it. Again, though, I do think that it has shaped how I feel about the medical community and medical experiences. And also just in regards to like the unmasking piece about that. I know for my Indigenous relatives, who are pegged as Indigenous, who are outwardly have brown skin or are darker than I am, I know their experiences have been different than mine. And I know that even though that doesn't affect me directly, there is this pain that I carry around seeing that struggle and knowing that struggle, particularly as a child. And, you know, my dad also had, when I was little, had a really awful experience with police. He was beaten very severely by police and had ended up getting a brain injury because of that, which has impacted worse upon his autism and being able to seek diagnosis and get the help that he needs. And it's just been this awful thing to have to witness how difficult that journey has been. And so for myself as a child, and I was growing up with that and growing up beside that trauma, as though I know it doesn't affect me directly, I know that it does. And I carry the pain from knowing and seeing it and seeing that trauma. So yeah, I'm at a place still where I don't think our medical community is caught up at all around neurodiversity. And there's that other layer of like, I have a lived experience of fear of medical professionals anyway, and of this whole experience. And so I think that it plays a role in that way, in that I carry on that intergenerational trauma in myself. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
Thanks for sharing. And then Carissa, for you, with I mean, you've touched already a little bit about your privilege being, you know, walking with white privilege, but what about for like your kiddos? And you have mentioned in school the difference in experiences, but race overall, how has that been? And even just navigating that as a white parent with BIPOC kids.
Well, I share similar concerns to Lavon around letting my kids out by themselves, because especially my son, who has explosive anger, and generally that's towards me or my daughter, because I think he understands, because he wants to understand the world so well. When George Floyd was murdered, there was a lot of discussions around this, and he like watched all of them, you know, because his dad was watching them. And so he's a masker when it comes to things like that, and he brings a lot of his anger home. But my biggest fear is what happens when he wants to express his anger to someone who's doing something to him that's not okay. Is he going to be able to hold that in? And like, he really shouldn't have to, but as a Black person, he feels the need to, because he's going to be targeted. And as he gets older, he's going to be big. We have big people in our family. He's already taller than most people, so he's going to be scary in the eyes of other people, even though he's the gentlest person I've ever met on the like and very compassionate, similar to like what you said, Lavon. Like, my son is similar to yours, where he notices when other people, there's something wrong. He doesn't necessarily know something's wrong, but he knows that something's going on and he wants me to help because he doesn't know how to, you know, things like that. But nobody will see that side of him if he gets mad. And so like, I haven't had to experience that. So like but I've seen all the news stories. So like, that's the difference, is that I don't really know what that looks like. And he hasn't been racially profiled yet, but I've been with his father when he's been racially profiled, and he's been with his father when he's been racially profiled. And the difference is that his father doesn't see it when he's racially profiled. He just thinks that's what life is like, and that happens to everyone, which is like another kind of interesting piece of navigating this, because I've seen so many things within his family. His family's talked about things that have happened to him, but because of his neurodiversity, he doesn't understand that stuff. So like, I'm like, how do I teach my child that? Well, his father's saying that's not happening, but I've witnessed it, you know? So like, there's that other level of things, because, and I've had conversations with him, and he has really high anxiety, but they're conversations we need to have because he needs to know what to do, you know? So it's balancing that, like trying not to scare him, but also trying to equip him to be out in public by himself, and it's really scary. It's really scary, the thought of him growing up and being alone and what's going to happen, because he doesn't, when he gets really mad, he doesn't have control. And if he was a white person with autism, that wouldn't be as big an issue. They would be like, they wouldn't necessarily shoot him, they would just take them to jail, and then we'd be able to figure it out, you know. So I I think I answered the question. Did I answer the question?
Yes, yeah, you
Yeah.
did. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think too, like, just to kind of tie some of this together of what everybody has been saying, and that Joni's touch on that intergenerational trauma, and Levon, your mentioning of the cultural experience of like education and almost like that assimilation part being really important. How, it's not like when you're a parent and we're in this place and we're trying to be honoring and we're figuring out our own neurodivergence and reparenting ourselves and holding space for our kiddos and recognizing that, like, it's not just what's happening right in this moment. It is, our parents' generation, and that trauma or those values or those norms or those that type of parenting being passed down that we're also navigating. And, like, if you have within your family that experience of um, in for some races, there's a greater chance that your kids might be removed from you, based on like how you're parenting. And so now with the unschooling and for a lot of neurodivergent kids being taken out of school because brick and mortar doesn't work for them, there's a higher level of scrutiny for racialized families doing that than there is for white families. And so navigating all of that too. I feel like we need a part 2 on this conversation. So I want to wrap us up, and I just want to, give everybody the opportunity to share, if there was something that you would like to see changed or made different or provided, or what do you want people to know about parenting neurodivergent BIPOC kids. And how about we'll go in the order that we started. So Levon, will come to you, and then Carissa, and then we'll wrap up with Joni.
Yeah, I would just say I'm so happy and grateful that there's so much more awareness, like way more awareness than 10 years ago. And so really happy for that. And for anyone who is parenting in ND BIPOC kiddo, find your community. Like that has been saving grace for me in terms of the different communities that they're out there, whether it's BC Ed Access or Connects Autism Network or MAR, just find the community, because it can be really isolating and lonely at times. So finding that community is really important. And then in terms of change, with the same energy and vigor that we have approached anti-racism, I'd like for us to approach anti-ableism in the same way. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Carissa?
Can I go last? I'm still thinking of what I want to say.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Joni, how about you?
Yeah, I think that my advice is to take on the ability, if you can, to become a good self-advocate. I think that this journey for myself and with my children has taught me that I have to become really, is inept the right word about being good at something? I need to be
Adept.
Adept, thank you. Adept. I need to be well equipped to advocate. And I sometimes have to override my trauma and my nervous system in order to do that. And that's hard. And so as a person with autism, I have to also nourish my own nervous system and my own body. And the other piece of that is that I need to recognize that my children's journey with this isn't the same as mine, and that it doesn't have to be the same story. And it's not going to be, because I won't let it be, and also because we live in a different world. So I guess if you are also like myself and you have neurodivergence and you're raising neurodivergent kids, to just remember that this parenting journey is going to trigger your own lived trauma and your own experiences, and that's going to be hard. And learning how to recognize what's yours and theirs is an important part of it, in just giving your children the space to have their own experiences with their own neurodiversity and their own neurodivergence, and what that's going to look like for them. And then what I would like to see change, I back Levon's statement, and that I hope that we can see the same movement, the same energy towards anti-ableism and to true neurodiversity, and also, nothing about us without us kind of deal, right? Like I don't want to hear from experts anymore. I want to hear from people who live it every day and have to deal with it every day, and who are, because that's where we're getting our best information. That's where the advocacy really lies, is who are we listening to? Who are we amplifying here? We need to be amplifying autistic voices. We need to be amplifying neurodivergent voices. And I think that with that, I'd like to say that I hope that our institutions, particularly schools, will catch up to that soon as well, because it's time. It's really time for that.
Okay, I think I found what I want to say. So I'm going to talk about it kind of also with the lens of an educator. So because I work in a diverse school and I've worked in other schools, and they're really far behind. Schools do not know how to deal with kids who deal with intersectionalities, and like I'm a learning support teacher, and I am the only one of all of the teachers in learning support teachers in my school who have any lived experience with disability. And that's really often true of most schools. And so that's why a lot of the times the strategies that are being used are not always the best for our kids. And I'm seen as less than within my staff because I have a disability, I have trouble expressing myself, and I have the lived experience of having disabilities. I have the experience of being parents to kids with disabilities who are also racialized, and my voice is not always heard because the people who have the loudest voices are the people who don't experience it within the school. So my other thing to say is parents' voices are the most important within the school. You have the most power. And that's what I always tell my parents. And that's what I tell myself when I'm still fighting that hard fight, because I have to fight almost every day for my kids, and it is exhausting. I know probably everyone on this panel feels like it is exhausting because you feel like you are literally yelling into the void. But things do happen if you keep going. You just have to find the right people. So find someone like me, find someone who will listen. And I found people within the district that I work in who will listen. And it takes a long time. And it's hard to find those people. There's also advocates outside of school that you can access for various different things. Bring those people with you, because whenever I'm in a meeting with a parent who doesn't have an advocate with them, and I'm the only person supporting them, that's really hard. The more voices you have that will advocate for you, the more power you'll have against the district, against the school, and they're going to listen more. Because the more people you have on your side, the more they're forced to listen. I start CCing everyone in emails, all the people, because I want everyone to hear what I'm saying. And so that the one person who's ableist or racist or whatever can't continue to hold that up against you, because all these other people will witness it and they know that what they're doing isn't okay. So yeah, that's what I want to leave with you, is bring people in, power in numbers, but also parents have the strongest voice within a district. Even though it's really exhausting, it's important that parents are asking for what their child needs and are like finding who to ask for that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. And on that, I would take that a step further of like, if you are a parent who's watching this and maybe you don't have neurodivergent kids or racialized kids, and you're here wanting to know how you can help, I would say, get to know your school community, get to know the other parents that are there, and when you're needed, be there with them. Go to those PAC meetings, or like Krista says, go to those meetings with the teachers or the administration, and help lend your voice to that. Because as parents who are in this fight constantly, whether it's a race issue or a neurodivergent issue or the intersection of those two, like we're tired, we are constantly fighting. And so being able to have someone there to lean on, to also have that loud voice with us, is so helpful. And so check in, don't override, right? Don't swoop in to save, but check in and see how you can support where you're needed, and then just build that stronger school community around your kids. So thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists, Lavon, Joni, Carissa, for spending your time with us, for sharing your experience, your stories, your advice. Thank you to all the people who came and bared witness and learned with us this morning, and for all of those people who are going to be watching the recording. Thank you for wanting to learn, wanting to grow, wanting to be allies, wanting to unlearn all of those socialized norms and pressures to really be the best parents that we can be for our kiddos, and to work towards making the world a place where everybody can just be accepted and be their authentic self, and have that real mutual liberation within the world. So thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and we will see you at our next MAR event, whether it's a discussion or a workshop or the Be a Kid event. Love to see you all the time. Have a great day.
Bye.